Knowledge is solely an attribute of the mind. Sensation is solely an attribute of the body. Mind is static light, the one and only power source of this universe. Thus thinking, you see what man calls life in a new light. You see it as the manner in which God manifests the idea of light and eternal life by dividing his one idea into countless pairs of many seemingly separate ideas, for that is what vibrating light waves are. These waves of light emerge from their fulcrum zeros and disappear into them in endless repetitions forever and ever. The wave is an extension of heaven to earth and back again. The wave is a projection from the spiritual universe of rest to a resting point in the physical universe, and back again to the spiritual universe for renewal of power to repeat the journey. Another way of saying it is that the wave is an emergence from the static condition of rest through the dynamic condition of motion to the static condition and back again, or that it is an extension of cause through effect and back again through effect to cause.
The universal octave. The heartbeat of the universe, starting from zero of rest, spirals from its minimum to its maximum and back again to zero, in 4 pairs of opposite actions and reactions. These 4 pairs of opposite electric interweavers constitute the universal spiral octave wave, by means of which the dynamic universe of effect rises from the static universe of cause. Figure 67. The octave wave formula which governs all motion and its birth position in the universal wave is as follows in Figure 68. Figure 68 is the two-way journey from 0 through 0 to 0. 0 to 4 means the centripetal direction toward the apex of the spiral, which leads to higher potential, density, gravity, and the white heat of incandescence. 4 to 0 means the centrifugal direction toward the base of the spiral, which leads to lower pressure, lower potential, vacuity, radiativity, and the black cold of space. Each of these is half of a cycle. The reason an octave cannot be counted from 1 to 8 instead of from 1 to 4 is because each of the pressures, which bear the relations of 1 to 4 positive in the octave, is a credit pressure, which has its equal opposite debit pressure in 1 to 4 negative. The elements of matter, born on the spiral pairs of opposites as tones, have the same relation as tones of music have to the octave wave. All wave motion is expressed in 8 tones, 4 pairs of opposites. The middle pair is seemingly 1. The octave is usually expressed as 7 for this reason. An octave is a series of orderly harmonic tones. Tones are multiplied in divided pressures of light, spaced rhythmically with mathematical precision upon each octave wave of motion. The law which applies to one effect of motion applies to all, whether sound wave, electric current, color spectrum, or octaves of elements of matter. No state of motion has permanence or even duration. Everything is forever in a state of transition, changing its position in its wave by either multiplying or dividing its vibration frequencies to change its conditioning. The basis of all octaves is the keynote of rest, from which the octave springs to express the idea which lies within the magnetic stillness of that keynote. The fulcrum of the wave of musical octaves is its keynote, from which all tonal changes in the octave are mathematically calculated in wave frequencies and volume. That keynote is always in one's consciousness, whether the note is being sounded or not. It is the balance of its octave. All tones are out of balance with it at all times and forever desire balance. No state of motion can evade the keynote of rest from which it sprang, nor can it be separated from it electrically in matter or consciously in mind. No matter what instrument produces octave tones, its frequencies and other dimensions must be in the orderliness demanded by the opening and closing spiral pairs, which control those tones by conditioning them. Likewise, no matter what the instrument, whether larynx of man, string of violin, carbon wave field, or color spectrum, its sole motivating power for producing change of dimensions for the purpose of producing change of tone is electric pressure directed by desire and borrowed from the keynote of the octave's stillness. Furthermore, all power thus borrowed from one expression in any octave tone must be in balance with the opposite of that tone within which those borrowings have been debited. This outstanding fact of natural law must be borne in mind in considering those principles as applied to the mechanics of the universal wave, which produces the octave wave tones of the elements of matter with such precision that any effect produced by any of them in combination or separately will produce that same effect always. The elements of matter. An invariable characteristic of nature is to express life-death cycles of any idea in 9 lesser interweaving cycles enfolded in the one. When we think of man as an idea, we think of him as grown up to fullness of middle age. Until then, we think of generating man as infant, child, and youth. Following his generating cycles come the degenerative ones in which he gradually repays all of his borrowings from his zero of rest and returns to that zero to again borrow power to re-express the idea of man. Figure 71. This process of nature, which expresses its cycles of idea in 9 lesser cycles, is conspicuously present in the life-death cycles of the elements of matter. Carbon alone expresses the idea of matter. All the 9 octaves of the elements are stages of unfoldment and refoldment of carbon. The first 4.5 octaves lead to the maturity of carbon by the generative contraction of gravity. It is the hardest of all the other stages of its transition, having the highest melting point. The last 4.5 octaves lead from maturity through old age to disappearance at the end of the 9-octave cycle by the radiative expansion of vacuity. Figure 70. Genero-activity begins at the birth of carbon in the first octave with genero-active, inner explosive speed of light, which is 186,400 miles per second. It ends with an equal radioactive outer explosive speed. This speed is the limit at which motion can reproduce itself in curved wave fields before reaching zero where motion and curvature cease. Carbon fulfills the plan of the Creator in his desire to create but one form, the cube sphere. Carbon alone crystallizes in true cube, with all of the qualities of the true cube and sphere fully exemplified. All other elements which crystallize as cubes are octave extensions of carbon. All such extensions occupy the 404 position of wave amplitude. In carbon are all of the elements of its previous stages, just as in man are all the actions and reactions of his previous stages. Hydrogen is a 1-octave younger prototype of carbon. It forms on the wave amplitude at 404, just as carbon forms at 404, 1 octave ahead. In hydrogen is a whole octave of elemental tones. Several of these have been recently discovered and wrongly named isotopes. Isotopes are split tones, such as those which a violinist could produce between full tones. An amazing thing happens at this point in the unfolding of carbon's life record. Hydrogen's melting point is 259 degrees below 0 centigrade, and in 1 octave, the winding up process of nature acts like a whiplash at its halfway position, where genero-activity and radioactivity meet as equals. This effect tightens the winding of carbon into such a dense substance that the melting point jumps to 3,600 degrees above 0 in that 1 octave. Nature immediately counterbalances this accelerative action by dropping nitrogen, the next element beyond carbon, into a gas which melts at 210 degrees below 0 centigrade. It does not recover from the gaseous condition during the rest of its octave. The cosmic seed of the carbon octave is helium. Silicon is 1 octave older than carbon. The melting point of silicon drops to less than 1/2 of its younger stage, 1420 degrees. The cosmic seed of the silicon octave is neon. When carbon becomes still another octave older at the 404 position of cobalt in the 6th octave, it divides its full tone into 10 split isotope tones, 5 on either side, figure 70. Carbon at this stage has lost much of its vitality and changes its character by thus dividing it into cobalt isotopes. Its melting point has dropped to 1480 degrees, which is slightly higher than the silicon stage of carbon. Because of sharing that position with 10 others, it has lost much of its true cube-sphere quality of balance, which the 404 position manifests. The evidence of that is the metallic quality of cobalt, which would be impossible in the true cube-sphere position of 404 in the octave wave. The 404 position is one of balance between the pairs of metallic opposites, such as iron and nickel, manganese and copper, chromium and zinc, or sodium and chlorine. When any of these pairs lose their metallic quality, such as iron and oxygen in iron rust, or sodium and chlorine in sodium chloride, they find both rest and balance in the stony quality of the salts. They crystallize in the cubic system if they are equal or near equal opposite pairs. Sodium chloride is a good example. One can see its approximately true cubes in sodium chloride, ordinary table salt, or in the distorted cube crystals of sodium iodide. The 404 position in the octaves of the elements is the position of rest, where any action must end its half cycle and begin its other half. It comes to a point of rest before returning to a point of rest, as all actions and reactions in nature do. At 1 octave of still further aging, carbon becomes rhodium and again climbs to its amplitude position at 404 by 5 efforts and descends by 5 more. Rhodium is more vital than cobalt, for its melting point is 1950 degrees, figure 70. The cosmic seed of rhodium octave is krypton. Great vitality is often evidenced in nature's creations after they have fully matured. The radioactive death principle is as vital in disintegrating the body as generative principle is in integrating it. That vitality is enhanced by the opposition of the generative resistance set up against it. Such strong vital metals as silver, nickel, copper, tantalum, tungsten, osmium, platinum, and gold belong to the aging half cycles of carbon. Tantalum is a radioactive metal which becomes so dense because of opposition between the two electric conditioners that its melting point reaches 3400 degrees centigrade, or within 200 degrees of carbon. Osmium follows with a melting point of 2700 degrees, and platinum at 1755 degrees. In this octave, the violent drop from carbon's melting point to nitrogen's melting point at minus 210 is balanced by this corresponding generative reaction. In the next octave of carbon's aging, the radioactive death principle becomes more evident in lutetium. After reaching its 3 position in the positive half of its octave, it arrives at its balance position of 404 only after making 13 efforts, as evidenced by 13 isotopes including unknowns. These are balanced by 13 in the negative half cycle. Among these 13 is the vital tungsten, a negative metal of great commercial value. By bombarding this metal with a sufficiently high current to cause it to disintegrate, it will discharge its seed of inert cosmic gases, just as an oak tree will discharge its cosmic seed in acorns. The cosmic seed of the lutetium octave is xenon. The cosmic seed of carbon's last octave of disappearance arises from the inert gas nitron. Octaves unfold from their past recorded seed, and they must have a seed into which their present record can refold. That principle is absolute in nature. Radium and actinium evidence the going to seed process of all completed cycles of growing things. in a strong measure. One can see this process taking place in radium without resorting to the electrocution process referred to as applied to tungsten. A small telescopic instrument, the spinthariscope, contains a needle upon which a microscopic portion of radium has been placed in front of a fluorescent screen. By looking through its lenses in the dark, one can see the shedding of the cosmic seed of the slowly dying carbon in its radium stage as the rays of those cosmic seeds bombard the screen. The effect is beautiful, like looking into the heavens on a starry night with all of its stars twinkling into appearance and disappearance, as fireflies twinkle in the meadow on a dark night. Carbon never comes within perception at tomium, but its efforts to reach tomium are evidenced in the uranium group of isotopes, of which there are 15 before tomium is reached. Out of this group, several have been found and made use of, especially those from which the atom bomb has been produced, figure 70. Radioactivity has so nearly reached its maximum at this point that the speed of the cosmic seed shed by these isotopes has been measured at 180,000 miles per second, which is approximately the speed of light nearing its ending point at tomion, where the octave again begins at alphanon. The positive principle. The foundation of the spiritual universe is stillness, the balanced stillness of the one magnetic light of God. Balanced stillness is the positive principle of stability and unity. In it there are no negations. The negative principle. The foundation of the physical universe is motion. The ever-changing motion arising out of pairs of unbalanced conditions, which must forever move to seek the balanced stillness of unity from which they sprang as multiple pairs of units. Unbalanced motion is the negative principle of instability, multiplicity, and separateness, which is this physical universe of electric octave waves of opposed lights. In the negative principle there is no positive. It is composed entirely of pairs of negations, which are forever voiding each other, canceling each other's action and reaction, thus negating each other by never allowing either one to exceed its fixed zero of universal stillness. Quality begets quantities. The still magnetic light universe of God's knowing is an invisible, unchanging, unconditioned, and unmeasurable quality from which visible, changing, conditioned, and measurable quantities spring to simulate those qualities through two-wave motion. There is no one word in any language to express that quality, so we must use many words, all having the same meaning but different connotations. These words are mind, consciousness, love, life, truth, desire, knowledge, power, balance, and law. The God quality of the one light is seemingly transformed into quantities by being divided into pairs of oppositely conditioned light pressures of this electric universe. These divided pairs are then multiplied into countless octave wave units of light pressures and set in opposite directioned motion to create the illusion of sequence, change, dimension, condition, and time. Man's infinity ends in the eyes of man where it began. All things in my mirrored universe end where they began. Eternity thus ends in now, and now in eternity. See thou that man well knows the illusions which deceive his sense seeing. Point out to him my mirrors and my lenses which curve my universe of seeming into image spheres of my thinking as seed for multiplying one into many ones. Say thou to him, all things occupy the same space, and each thing occupies all space. All things extend from all things and are extensions of all things. Likewise I say, all things center all things and are involved in all things. Say thou these things in words of man's knowing, and say thou that I, the light, center him and all things else, for I am everywhere. From the Divine Iliad. Inert gases. The octaves of the elements of matter grow from seed, just as all things grow from seed. From the moment the elements unfold from their seed, they are in a constant state of transition, from the beginning of their cycle to the end. Elements are not fixed, created things. They are pressure conditions of light waves. Those conditions of light pressures are constantly changing from infancy to old age in the elements of matter, just as they are in the animal kingdom. The inert gases are cosmic elements which will not combine with any other elements. They constitute the recording system of this creating universe. They surround the zero from which motion springs and to which it returns. They represent minimum motion in the wave, just as amplitudes represent maximum motion. They are the seeds of the octaves of matter, and each octave has a different seed, just as different trees have different seeds. Elements are waves, and waves disappear and reappear. God's recording system does not allow any creating thing to disappear without recording the actions and reactions of its stages of appearance. All states of motion are recorded in the inert gases. In the inert gases are the souls of their bodily manifestations in the universe of motion. In them is desire for expression, and the pattern form of that desire. The cosmic inert gases fill all space between the stars of heaven. They insulate the states of motion from each other by their balancing zero. They bring all motion into being through the will of the Creator, true to the pattern of desire. They are the source of balancing cosmic rays which interchange between zero and matter. They vitalize matter with the omnipotence of creative desire which lies within the zero of these cosmic rays. There are 9 cosmic gases, the first and the last being one. Alphanon begins the cycle and ends it. There is no beginning and no ending.
The electrochemical records of the zero seed of all things are the zero elements, which are known as the inert gases, from which center of the fulcrum zero of polarity, all polarizing body forms extend to manifest vitalizing life, and return as depolarizing forms to manifest devitalizing death.
The inert gases are God's recording and repeating system. They record, remember, and repeat all actions and reactions of all things from eternity unto eternity. They broadcast all of creation to all creation, and likewise receive the broadcasts of all creation for rebroadcasting to all creation.
The inert gases are zeros in the universal equilibrium. Polarity divides and extends the one light into electric thought wave cycles. which appear from the one still light as moving pairs of moving lights and disappear into that still light for reappearance forever without end.
The inert gases are the spiritual elements, which born and reborn the physical elements, and meticulously make spectrum records of their eternities of rebornings.
The inert gases center all elements from within to control their unfolding cycles of polarizing, depolarizing form, and balance them from without by two poles of still light to control the refolding of form into their zero seed.
The inert gases record purposeful unfoldings and give back to each corpuscle of motion its cell memory of purpose and its instinctive guidance.
They likewise give back to awakening consciousness the records of all cycles of soul awakening, which have been written in the soul seeds of all unfolding, refolding body forms.
The inert gases write down in God's book of light all that you and I and anyone has ever been. Likewise what the ant, the elephant, the tiger, violet, and bee have ever been, or have ever done since their beginnings, and give them back to them after every rest period which divides their cycles.
God's sole occupation is the building of moving body forms to simulate his one idea of cause and effect, which creation is.
There is a very definite bridge between God and man. It is invisible in the vacuum of the zero stillness of God's kingdom, but it has a visible link at every point where that bridge touches the shores of the action universe of motion. That is something which every man can understand, for he can hold the symbol of that great reality in his hand in the form of a simple seed.
He has never known, however, that in that imperishable seed, within that perishable acorn, which he holds in his hand, is the whole answer to where the oak tree comes from to live and where it goes when it dies. That is something which the physicist can more readily understand when you tell him that the imperishable, invisible seed within that acorn is an inert gas, or a combination of several octaves of inert gases.
God thinks in electric pulsations, which are recorded in motion as 4 pairs of rings, which are compressed into spheres. Each cyclic pulsation is manifested by the projection of 4 concentric light rings in one plane from one point of magnetic mind light, in which the red half of the spectrum is on the outside of the rings and the blue half is on the inside. These 4 rings are the seed of the octave wave and occupy that position in the wave known as the zero group of elements, or inert gases.
You will note that an inert gas marked 0 begins and ends each octave. The 9 inert gases are the shores of the visible universe, where the invisible bridges, which link mind and motion, touch the moving action universe. There are 9 of them because the bridge has 9 parts, which we might call entrances to mortality and exits to immortality. The wave is created by dividing the 4 sexless rings of the inert gases into 4 pairs of oppositely sex-conditioned rings and projecting them towards sex mates of adjoining wave fields to find balance and unity in each other. God's concentrative thinking compresses these mate rings as they are projected. This is the genero-active uphill flow of energy principle which multiplies power and speed in the inverse ratio of the cube as they are thus centripetally projected, until the red and blue pair of cyclonic vortices, thus resulting, collide at wave amplitudes midway between the two zero cathodes from which they were projected. This is the manner in which unbalanced and separated sexed pairs are united into the oneness of the two balanced and equal hemispheres of spherical incandescent suns.
Within the 4 zero rings of the wave is the cathode mother womb of space, which is seeking the outside to fulfill her office of borning the seed of the Father. To aid this process, the 4 pairs of projecting rings gradually close up their centering holes as the rings are compressed from their cone bases towards their apices, where the collision of sex mating completes the closing in the incandescent sphere thus formed.
Likewise, all chemical elements of the octaves are red and blue lights which are projected from the pure white light of their inert gases, which are their octave seed. They return to their invisible oneness by radioactive emanations, which are pure white incandescent microscopic suns. Man calls them alpha, beta, gamma, or helium rays, as they emanate from tungsten, actinium, radium, or uranium at almost the speed of light. Each of them is the seed for another body of its like kind, as suns are seed for all bodies.
There are 9 of these inert gases in nature, as you will see by the 9-stringed harp of the universe. The only difference in their structure is that each consecutive inert gas, from 1 to 9, is smaller than its predecessor, for each octave is a multiplication of its predecessor.
The upper diagram, marked AA, represents the creation of an octave of tones, beginning with the inert gas of 4 motionless rings, centered by the stillness of universal energy, to act as cathodes at both ends. This pair of 4 rings divide and extend their pairs of 4 rings toward approaching mates. Electric compression causes the rings to begin to spin, then to become smaller and turn faster as they approach the plane of collision, where all 4 pairs unite to form a sphere. This represents the centripetal half of the journey, which charges, polarizes, heats, and multiplies potential. These are the qualities necessary for increasingly vitalized life.
Observe carefully what now happens. Centripetal force reaches its maximum and begins to die, and centrifugal force takes over. Look again at the top diagram in Figure 42, and carefully note that the 4 rings of the inert gases are like the 4 rims of wheels placed within each other, with one common hub. Now note that the 4 rims become the hub when they are compressed and extended. Observe also that the extensions cause the appearance of cones as centripetal force winds the cone bases into a sun at the apex point of collision.
The electric current begins and ends at cathodes. Cathodes are still points in the zero universe from which the energy of desire for creation is expressed. Chemically, cathodes are the inert gases of the octaves, which are not elements, for they will not mix with them. They are the seed from which the elements spring and to which they return. From the spectrum standpoint, they are white light from which all colors extend when put under electric strain, and to which they return when the strain ceases. From the tonal point of view, they are the keynotes of the octave from which one can never escape knowledge of their presence in every tonal harmony. From the mathematical point of view, they are the zero of the whole octave. From the geometric form point of view, which its basis for motion gives it, the inert gas consists of 4 rings, one within the other.
Each octave of the elements grows from its inert gas, just as a tree grows from its seed. The inert gases record and store for repetition all that has gone before in that octave. In the middle leaf table of the elements, hydrogen is shown without an inert gas. This is as impossible as producing a child without parents.
That omnipresent point from which you have issued your body is the same point at which the visible mortal you becomes invisible and again assumes immortality. That one point in all this universe controls your every movement from your first one many millions of years ago to the last one, which consummates the idea of man as expressed by you. That one point is your soul of the universal soul. It is your mind of the universal mind as one unit of creation.
You are one with that mind. In fact, you are that mind. Your body is the thinking and imagining of that mind. The eternal you is that center, and your eternal body is that series of 4 rings of fluorescent light, which is eternally wrapped around that centering soul of the eternal you. Those 4 rings are eternal records of you. They are as immortal as you are immortal. They are the microfilm of you yourself.
The calm sea, for example, is an unchanging, unmeasurable quality of oneness, of sameness and stillness. Upon its calm surface there is no change, nothing to count or to measure. The moment that quantities of waves spring from that quality of calm, those quantities can be measured. Likewise, they are forever changing, nor are there 2 points in them which are similarly conditioned. This creating electric universe is composed of moving light waves, which spring from a calm sea of the one still light. It is a universe of moving parts of quantities which simulate the quality of stillness, from which those quantities spring. The quantities of divided and conditioned pairs of opposite lights, which thus simulate the one, are not the one they simulate. The Creator is one mind, indivisible. Creation is one whole idea of mind divided into countless simulated ideas of mind through motion. The simulation of idea thus expressed is not the idea that it expresses. Parts of the one whole idea are only seeming. There are no 2 separate or separable things in the universe. There is but one whole simulation of the one whole idea. Everything that is of everything else that is. All things are indissolubly united. From the Divine Iliad.
I've developed a way of looking at this through the intricate order that's based really on quantum theory. And the way it works is to consider that there's a wave. You may think of this wave coming from outside, from the whole universe, which converges to a point and then diverges again. Now, it links everything. It means that everything is internally related to everything. Now,
of course, The real world's a bit more complicated than this little circular dish. We don't know whether it has a circular boundary or not. That doesn't really matter. But the thing is, it is three-dimensional, not two-dimensional. So the wave structures are likely to be rather more complicated than this. However, we can understand that in a universe full of vibration, that centers can exist which have particle-like properties, which will have different phases that can account for the different charges of different particles, but that these are standing waves, and that the energy coming into each one and the energy going out of each one is the same energy that passes through the center as the concentric waves converge on the spot and then go out, and that the arrangement of all of these different ones is supporting the phases of the waves of all other particles. Every particle in the universe is being constantly recreated by the energy of all other particles. This is something which is not really understood by physicists, and I think it's a very important point. If we want to understand how the universe works, we do need to say that nature actually works like this.
Animations is Gabriel Lafreniere, and he showed here how a wave is made from the incoming part, a standing wave, plus the outgoing part. These two components together make a standing wave, which you can see here. So it appears to just stand in space, but it's actually composed of the inwards and outwards waves. Of course, the outwards wave is just the inwards wave after it has passed through the center and comes out again of the spherical wave descending on a point. So this type of wave has the correct properties that we need to explain particles. If the particle is in motion, then the point at which it's converging has to be moving, so the waves are converging on a point and coming out from a point in opposite ways. So when you get the standing wave, you get this suddenly a strange effect where the wave that we saw before has superimposed on it these other bands of alternating phase, and these are de Broglie waves. All these calculations, as we had all managed to derive these calculations that show the de Broglie waves from this understanding of standing waves, but in this animation Gabriel has made it very clear what's actually going on, and the understanding of all of these things. It's clear that these are real waves. Real waves are happening that explain the nature of matter as being standing waves.
People think our particles are spherical, wave structures consisting of an outgoing wave combined with an in wave. Mathematicians are fairly happy with this because these are the only two possible solutions of the equations. So that part is okay. Now the center of this structure behaves just like a particle. The only problem is not many people know it yet because not many people have investigated it.
Universe, 9 octaves. Gases begin the first octave, very dense metals, and the 9th octave, like plutonium, being the last of the natural octave, or last of the natural elements. So you have very few rings with gases. You start at hydrogen, 1 electron, or whatever they call it, an electron. There's no such thing, but it's more of a ring. And that ring, I kind of like to use these words. There's a protonic force of inward motion or compression, a neutronic force, which is a point of reversal, and then an electronic force, which is the point of expansion back to stillness. So stillness compresses to a point and then expands in a reversal of direction back out to stillness.
Man can never die, for he is omnipresent light, and he exists everywhere. Likewise, man's body cannot die, for man's body manifests immortal man, and immortal man always has a body in which to manifest. This body which extends from the earth disappears into the heavens and the earth, but that which disappears to sensed man of earth has not ceased to be, for its pattern has been recorded for repetition. It still is and will reappear. The senses of man are not attuned to the rest of the cycle of man's bodily journey from disappearance to reappearance, but man's knowing reaches out over the entire cycle, and man can know eternal repetitiveness of his body when he knows God in himself. When water disappears beyond the senses as water, vapor, and gases, we know they will reappear as water when they have completed their cyclic journey. As man knows the light in him, he will as surely know that he will return from eons to complete the purpose of manifesting his Creator as one part of the whole idea. That purpose cannot be completed in one life cycle, nor in 10 times 10 million life cycles. Man has but begun to express the man idea on this planet. He still has a long way to go, and the body he needs in which to manifest will return to him as surely as the light of day reappears from the darkness of night into which it has disappeared. What happens after death? The unanswered mystery of where do we go when we die needs a comprehensive answer. Abstractions and theories are not satisfying. Nature's processes are simple and are all alike. What happens to one thing which disappears happens to all things. There are no exceptions to this process of nature. Fear dominates the world of today. While fear is in the world, love cannot also be. Love can never dominate the world until man ceases to live a primarily sensed existence and knows the light of the Spirit within him. This new age brings man one step nearer to the universe of greater knowing through greater comprehension of man's relation to man and to God. Each past cycle in the growth of man towards higher levels has been illumined by the few inspired messengers of the light who have known God in themselves. New inspired messengers who know God in themselves will likewise give the light to this new cycle, and these few messengers of the light must multiply into legions, for the need of a spiritual awakening is great. Man's whole reason for being is to gradually pass through his millions of years of physical sensing into his ultimate goal of spiritual knowing. Man has now reached a transition point in his unfolding where he must have that knowing. He can acquire that knowing only through greater awareness of the light, of the universal self, which centers him as one with God. Oh, okay, so we're at a new section. This is interesting, and I will include it. It is a graphic. The Secret of Light, Part 2, Omnipotence, the Universe of Power. And basically it is 1. The creating universe appears from the 1 and disappears into the 1. There's like a totem, 2 plus signs put together, creating a totem on either side. And there's a plus minus on one side, and then a minus with a plus under it on the other side. What God is, man is. God and man are one. Our seeming duality. We seemingly live in 2 universes, the still cosmic mind universe of knowing and the moving thought of mind rhythmic wave universe of sensing. We cannot sense the cosmic universe of God's knowing, nor can we know the thought wave universe of God's thinking. The cosmic mind universe of the one light of all knowing is all that is. The vibrating thought wave universe of sensing merely seems. The cosmic God light. The one still light of God is the cosmic light which watches over all creating things at countless points locatable by man but invisible to man. Man's senses have misled him into believing in a force called magnetism, which attracts compass needles and lifts tons of steel. These phenomena of motion are due to electricity and not to magnetism. The cosmic light is absolutely still. It neither attracts nor repels. We now need to comprehend the nature and purpose of the magnetic poles, of suns, planets, and all other moving extensions of the one light. He had magnetic poles, in quotation marks, P.S. Likewise, we need to know the nature and purpose of the two electric workers, which interweave this light mirage of seeming motion and dissolve it sequentially for rebuilding. This will give a foundation of knowledge to man which will enable him to see behind the illusions which deceive his senses. The time has come in the history of man's journey from his material jungle to his spiritual mountaintop, when it is imperative that he must live more and more in the cosmic light universe of knowing, and less in the electric wave universe of sensing. Man must know that his power lies in the stillness of his centering self, and not in the motion by means of which he manifests that stillness. He must know that his self is God in him. Also, he must know gradually the dawning awareness of the cosmic light of God in him, for which it comes an awareness of his purposefulness in manifesting the light and the power to manifest it. Man must now know the universe of God, for which it is instead of what his senses have made him to believe it to be. Also he must know that this forever creating universe, which seems so real to him, is but a cosmic cinema, conceived by the master playwright. It is but an electrically projected, spectrum-colored light and sound wave motion picture play of cause and effect, thrown on the black screen of imaged space and time. The cause is real, the effect is but a simulation of the reality. The self of man is cause, his self-creating body is effect. God's universe of magnetic light is static. God's perpetually creating electric wave universe of two moving lights is dynamic. It forever moves. The two moving lights are projected through each other from the static one to create the illusion of the idea they but manifest. The illusion which manifests the idea of creation through seeming motion is not the idea which is seemingly manifests. Creation is the product of mind knowing expressed in form by mind thinking. The product of mind is not the idea which it simulates. No idea of mind is ever created. It is but simulated by form and motion. Idea is eternal and belongs to God's still universe of knowing. Form of idea in matter is transient, but is eternally repeated as transient form of idea. The positive principle. There are 9 cosmic gases, the first and the last being one. Alphanon begins the cycle and ends it. There is no beginning and no ending. The list of cosmic gases follows: Alphanon, Betanon, Gammanon, helium, neon, argon, krypton, xenon, and niton. Spectrum analysis. The known octaves which lie within the range of perception are 5 1/2. These begin with the third or hydrogen octave and end with the uranium group, which are isotopes of actinium and thorium in the last octave. The invisible octaves of finely divided matter of space are 3 1/2 in number. These octaves are beyond our range of perception, but they are not beyond our knowing. Light is the universal language. Through spectrum analysis of light waves, man has been able to analyze and recognize each element when in its incandescent stage. By means of the spectroscope, he has been enabled to divide light rays through its prisms into the component parts which make up the life history of each stage of its two-way cycle. Each element tells the story of its entire previous incarnations in other octaves, since its beginning. Any line in one octave is repeated in the next, but shifted in position because of the changing pressures of each succeeding octave. The spectrum of hydrogen is preponderantly red. A bright red line indicates its present octave, Other red lines tell its past history in lower octaves. The simple history of hydrogen, as compared to the complex spectrum of iron, is like the history of an obscure youth as compared to that of Napoleon. In the spectrum analysis of iron, the lines which belong to iron and those which tell its recent and remote history can be seen at a glance. These lines also indicate the relative ability of the iron atom to charge or discharge. Wavelength 7181.8 is immediately recognizable as belonging to iron in its present octave. 6916.8 is recent history and 6944.8 is extremely remote history. Herein follows a partial list of lines whose wavelengths belong to iron or to its immediate midtone associates, and also other lists indicating its recent and its more remote history. And it has a diagram belonging to iron, recent history, remote history. So you guys can see that I will include this at the end. The visible and invisible spectrum is divided into several thousand lines. Each line is different in its shade of color and in its plane. Each line proves that this universe of varying motion is a universe of varying pressures. Atomic structure. The elements of matter are not different substances or different things. They are different pressure conditions of light waves. The light units of the elements are all alike, but are differently conditioned by the electric pressures exerted upon them during the inward or outward spiral journey from 0 to 0. The unanswered mystery of how the elements become mathematically precise octave tones, just as musical tones or color tones of the spectrum are mathematically precise in vibration orderliness, lies in the wave field gyroscopic principle. Together, the 8 elements of an octave form 2 halves of one whole cycle of tones, which ascend from 0 to 4, 0, 4 position of amplitude, and then descend again to 0 to begin anew. This spiral journey contracts into greater pressures as it approaches wave field amplitude positions at spiral apices, and expands into lower ones on the return journey to spiral bases. That two-way spiral journey of each half cycle extends between 6 mirrors of still light, which compose the wave field, and wind around a still shaft, which centers the spiral. 3 of these mirrors are the mirrors of action, and 3 are the mirrors of reaction, figure 75. The 3 of action are the inner intersection planes of the cube, and the 3 of reaction are the outer boundary planes of the wave field. All of these planes of the wave field are of 0 curvature, but the spiral universe which is forming within those planes is curved. Curved planes of light act as two-way lenses which bend light to focal points and extend it from those focal points radially. As the two-way spirals of forming matter extend from the wave field center in opposite directions toward wave field intersections, the 6 mirror planes of still light focus 3 points of still light upon the still shaft of each half cycle. Centers are formed at these focal points which become the 1, 2, 3 positive and negative elements of matter by rotating gyroscopically around the wheels of light, which act as equators for those borning tones. Multiplying and dividing pressures determine the density and volume of each succeeding element. The color spectrum records these pressures as the complete history of every element, from octave to octave of the whole 9-octave cycle of the elements. Multiplying pressures of the spiral also affect the curvature of its light lenses to such an extent that the focusing positions change their mathematical ratios in conformity with the acceleration of gravity and the deceleration of radiation. The positions of focal centers of gyroscopic wheels upon the wave shaft are thus affected, as diagrammed in Figure 76 and Figure 72. Each element is the square of the distance to and from its succeeding one, in accordance with its direction. The direction of gravity is the inverse square, and the opposite direction is the direct square. The volume of each succeeding element is likewise affected directly and inversely as the cube. 6 of the 8 gyroscopic wheels of the whole octave are thus accounted for by geometric projection of two-way opposed lights through each other. from two sets of three mirror boundary fields. The fourth double tone is formed at the rest point where 8 cube wave fields meet. This is the point of rest, which is known as the center of gravity in Earth's or Sun's, where motion and curvature cease. The complete sphere thus becomes a section of 8 adjoining wave fields and revolves around that point of rest upon the wave shaft, where the two half cycles of the wave meet. For this reason, the 404 position is one of balance, in which the yellow of orange is the dominating color of one of its two gyroscopic wheels, and the yellow of green is the other, centered by white. At the 2 points upon the still shaft of the turning sphere, where the shaft penetrates its surface, are the magnetic poles of still light, which control the balance of each sphere's turning. One of these is the north magnetic pole, which controls the winding of the sphere into density by centripetal electric force, and the other is the south magnetic pole, which controls its unwinding centrifugally into space. In a sphere such as our nearly mature Sun, these magnetic poles are practically upon the Sun's poles of rotation, but upon oblating planets, such as our Earth, the magnetic poles are removed from that pole of rotation in accordance with the measure of the Earth's oblateness. The elements of matter are miniature stellar systems. Every principle and law which applies to one applies to the other. This solar system is a gyroscopic wheel in the position which iron occupies in the elemental series. When it spirals a little further, it will correspond to a carbon atom. The Sun will then be a true sphere, and its new planets will also be true spheres. The gyroscopic principle accounts for that law of nature, which causes like elements to seek each other. All decomposing components are sorted out, element by element, gyroscopically. The efforts of man to transmute one element into another must be governed by this principle, and not upon the theory that another substance will be obtained by knocking out one electron. It makes no difference how many planets there are in a solar or atomic system, insofar as its substance as an element is concerned. One or more added or subtracted would not change the element into another substance, any more than one or more children would affect the nationality of their parents. Transmutation will become simplified by observing that the plane of gyration in relation to amplitude and the speed of revolution of the gyroscopic wheel upon its still shaft will alone change volume by either multiplying or dividing density. Great possibilities in new metals lie in the proper application of this principle. The shape of the universe. This ageless universe has no shape. It has a seeming infinite extension, but that extension is a reflected one. This electric universe of two-way extended light is but a series of mirrors which reflect into each other through curved lenses. Its seeming extension might be likened to a light within a mirror-bound room. One light within such a mirrored enclosure would seemingly extend infinitely, but the light thus mirrored would be the same light. The reflected extension would have no reality. The idea of continuity or discontinuity is based upon mirrored effect of an initial cause. Continuity infers time. Time is but one of the effects which constitutes this universe. Time flows two ways, but the senses detect only the forward flow. They cannot detect the backward flow, which cancels out the forward flow. Time is as unreal as the wave universe is unreal. What is true in principle of one wave is true of all waves. Each wave is a two-way reflected extension of an equilibrium zero, which we call a vibration. Vibrations appear, disappear, and reappear from their source of rest to manifest idea, which is existent alone in rest. Just as the vibration of one wave disappears into its zero of universal stillness, so do all vibrations disappear into the universal zero of stillness. This zero universe of vibrating waves can have no shape other than a seeming one. The voiding principle. This is a zero universe of seeming mechanical motion of force exerted in a seeming three-dimensional universe. Every action of any nature begins with zero, counts up to 9 to end and begin again at zero. Beyond 9 it cannot go, but up to 9 it must go. 9 is universal. 9 is universal because it is the wave field number, the 8 of the cube centered by the 0 of gravity in the sphere. Our decimal system is based upon the wave field of the cube sphere. It is as follows: 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, equals 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The musical scale and the spectrum of nature correspond to the wave field tones. They are as follows: musical, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Tones, do, re, mi, fa, sol, rest, sol, fa, mi, re, do. Spectrum, black, red, red, orange, yellow, white, yellow, green, blue, blue, black. Underneath it's the black and red, it's got violet on either end. Figure 75 demonstrates this fact. The 3 centering planes are centered by 0. All intersections of these planes add up to 8. 8 centered by their 0 source equals 9. Likewise, the cube itself adds up to 8 by counting the intersections of its 6 faces. Also, there are 8 directions of action and 8 of reaction, each 8 being 4 pairs, which are 9 by adding the centering 0. 9 is the 3 times 3 of length, breadth, and height extended from 0. The length, breadth, and height of any expression is 2 extended zeros centered by 0. Figure 2, page 219. Length and breadth are static, for they are both on equipotential levels. Height is dynamic for its radial. The universal 9 of matter and space is 3 mirrors of rest, centered by rest, from which all 3 extend at right angles to each other, each mirroring itself into the other. Figure 75. The universal 9 of the octave is 4 pairs of opposite pressures extending diagonally from 0, which centers the cube, to 8 zeros which corner the cube. Figure 75. The measure of extension from 0 to 0 is desire for extension. Desire for extension from 0 to 0 is energy in 0. Energy extended from 0 to 0 is manifested by pressures of desire equally multiplied and divided, equally added and subtracted, equally credited and debited, and equally and oppositely conditioned. The sum of all these balanced effects is 0. Figure 75. 0 pressures equally multiplied and divided are manifested by the action and reaction of motion. Motion is a projection of the opposed energy pressures of desire from within a centering 0 to the extended mirrors of rest, which measure desire and mirror it back to rest in the centering 0 as expressed desire. The sum of dually reflected motion thus expressed is 0. 0 thus extended by action to fulfill desire for expression, and simultaneously mirrored back to manifest the fulfillment of expressed desire, is all there is to this universe of rest. 0 multiplied or divided, added or subtracted, extended or retracted, results in 0. This is a 0 universe in all effects of motion, a seeming universe in time and sequence, and a mirage of universe of imaged forms. It is a universe of 2 negations which simultaneously cancel each other and sequentially repeat the canceling of their negations to create the illusion that 0 can be multiplied or divided or added to or subtracted from to create a reality which never is nor can become. Figure 75. That is what creation is. It is the imagining of knowing. Knowing is light. Light is still. Imagining is thinking. Thinking is the imagined action and reaction of motion mirrored from 0 of rest to 0 of rest. This is a still universe of the light of knowing. In it is no activity. But what about our senses? Our senses tell us otherwise. Our senses are inadequate. They deceive us mightily, and that is good. If the senses could but see the whole, there would be no play. The senses record motion alone, for the senses themselves are but motion. Motion is an illusion which only seems, it has no being. The senses do not know, but man believes that his senses do know, and in that belief lies man's confusion. The senses, being but motion, sense moving things and moving light mirrored as moving things. They sense the forward movement of an airplane piling up compression ahead of it, but they do not record the mirrored invisible counterpart of that plane, equal to it in potential and speed, moving backward into a vacuum behind the plane, which simultaneously voids the compression ahead of it. This inadequacy of the senses to record the backward flow of forward-moving things causes the illusions of sequence and of time. In Figure 77, this principle, diagrammed by arrows extending two ways from every element in the whole known series, indicates that integration is simultaneously balanced by disintegration. No time interval elapses between the debiting of any credit extended to opposites in nature. Figure 78 diagrams all matters as pairs of opposite conditions. Each line is connected with its opposite mate. Each of the pair is a negation of the other one. Each pair is conditioned as the two tanks of air in Figure 18 and the storage battery in Figure 19 on page 231 are conditioned. Each one of these elemental pairs is an equal and opposite mirrored extension from a centering zero fulcrum. The fulcrum of all effect is the one light of God. God alone is in man and in all things. Every action is voided as it occurs, is repeated as it is voided, and recorded as it is repeated. From the Divine Iliad. There's some notes, but obviously I'm missing something because it talks about pages 200 and something. So I don't know if I'll be able to find that or not, but I shall give it a try, because there might be something good there. Does it say what page this is? Yeah, it talks about all the way to page after, see page 280, page 279, and all that I have. How far did I go? All right. This might be it. I don't know. That principle is absolute in nature. Radium and actin... Oh my goodness. Okay. And it looks like that's it. There's some notes, but obviously I'm missing something because it talks about pages 200 and something. So I don't know if I'll be able to find that or not, but I shall give it a try, because there might be something good there. Does it say what page this is? Yeah, it talks about all the way to page after, see page 280, page 279, and all that I have. How far did I go? All right. This might be it. I don't know. All right. This might be it. I don't know. I thank you guys for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. Leave me a comment. Let me know if there's another public domain book that you'd like to hear me read. I love to learn. I love to read. Take care till next time. Omnipresence, the universe of being. In my universe, there is but one form from which all forms appear. That one form is the pulsing cube sphere, two halves of the heartbeat of my dual thinking. All forms pulse, therefore all forms are two. One form for the inbreathing pulse, which generates, and one for the outbreathing, radiating one. The cube is the sphere expanded by the outward breath to black rest in cold space, and the sphere is the cube compressed to the incandescence of white-hot suns by the inward breath. All spheres emerge from the pulsing, breathing cubes of space and return to them to find fulcrums of rest for re-emergence. Behold, I center one form where it seeks rest in me from the action of my thinking, and I envelop that form with its other half, where it may again find rest in me as another fulcrum for expression of my thinking. These two sexed halves extend from me and return to me, but they are not me, nor are they two halves of one, for they can never be two halves of one. They are always two, and never one. Nor can they unite, nor meet, for their ways are opposed ways, which never meet. For each one voideth each in their seeming meeting. Behold, I am within all things, centering them, and I am without all things, controlling them. But I am not those things which I center and control. See thou that man knows that each divided light of his conditioning which extends from me to him is balanced always. For I am balance, and that is truth and the law. For I am truth and the law. Say thou to him, each thing is everything, and each is everywhere. For I say that all things are the same things, for all things are universal. Each thing reaches through every other thing to the farthermost star. For this purpose have I set my mirrors and my lenses of dual light, to attain an infinity in my imaged universe in which no measure is. Man's infinity ends in the eyes of man where it began. All things in my mirrored universe end where they began. Eternity thus ends in now, and now in eternity. See thou that man well knows the illusions which deceive his sense seeing. Point out to him my mirrors and my lenses which curve my universe of seeming into imaged spheres of my thinking as seed for multiplying one into many ones. Say thou to him, all things occupy the same space, and each thing occupies all space. All things extend from all things and are extensions of all things. Likewise I say, all things center all things and are involved in all things. Say thou these things in words of man's knowing, and say thou that I, the light, center him and all things else, for I am everywhere. From the Divine Iliad.